or fire department next year.
Get going. We good?
Yeah, for president.
All right, good evening. Let's get tonight's meeting underway. We got a lot to do tonight. We'll start our meeting, as always, with the pledge to the flag. I'll ask Director Barnes to lead us in that.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Director. We'll start with the Metro Cable announcement. The open session meeting is videotaped for cablecast on Metro Cable 14. There's a replay on Saturday, August 12th, 2017 at 12 noon, and Sunday, August 13, 2017 at 9 a.m. on Channel 14. The webcast is at www.sacmetrocable.tv. The open session meetings are also available for viewing on the district website at www.metrofire.ca.gov. Now is the opportunity for members of the public to discuss matters of public interest within the district's jurisdiction, whether or not on the agenda. Do we have any speakers?
There are no speakers this evening.
Outstanding. We'll move on to the consent calendar, and before we take questions or comments from members of the board, I would just ask Chief Harms if you'd talk about a couple of the items on the consent calendar.
Sure, there's two items that are on there. Item number 2, which is the WestNet server, and the item number 3, which is the extrication equipment. And I think if you look at the two of them, they are very important. That the first one with the WestNet server, the impact that it will have with the new dispatching system. And it's key for us moving forward, and really what it allows us to do is that we spend a large amount of money to put the new dispatching packages in stations. But one of the things that this will allow us to do is do multiple dispatches at the same time. So when we truly look at our ability to reduce response time, and one of those key elements is the ability to get the notification to the stations. This one here, what it'll do is if there's 5 calls that are waiting to go out, all 5 of those calls will go out at exactly the same time. The company within the MDT on the vehicle and the station will be notified. It'll take a little bit of time for the dispatcher over the radio to catch up, but what it does is it reduces response time, which will have a huge impact. The other item you saw when Rescue 21 was down here, we had a new equipment, and I think the way we normally talk about them and people know about it is the Hearst tool or the Jaws of Life. We've had 6 units that are ready for replacement, and they're over 10 years old, and we have the opportunity to replace those. The one thing that you will see is that Jaws of Life really was, if you think of that old 1970 car and being able to open a door on it. Today, the diversity of the equipment is that the cars of today are made out of different levels of metal. You have airbags that are in there. You look at the side doors. The equipment today is a lot more technical to be able to do the job that we do out there. Both of them will have a huge impact on our service delivery. Both of them are at opposite ends of the spectrum, but both of them will have a great opportunity for us delivering service to the members that are in the field. And there's a whole bunch of them here that will be using both ends of that equipment.
Thank you, Chief. And just for the benefit of people who might not know, you talked about reducing response times, the need for the server to reduce response times. What is important about getting response times down?
You know, there's a couple different, there's 3 main categories on response time. It's call taking, so the call that comes in and the dispatcher takes the information, identifies the location, identifies the emergency, and gets it out. The next portion is our ability to notify the crews, and that the crews get on the notification, go from wherever they're at to the apparatus, and the last portion of it is actually over the street driving. So when you look at those, each one of them will look as a category of how to reduce that 911 call when it first comes in and process. The next one is getting the call out, being able to get from the station to the vehicle, and the last one is the response. And again, if you look at the fire side of it, A fire will double in size every 30 seconds. If you look at the medical side of it, and if you look at a patient that's not breathing, and we talk about that golden first 4 to 6 minutes of our ability to get there and start oxygen or CPR or start those basic things.
So this money for the server is going to go to help shorten that time and hopefully save some more lives.
Exactly.
Outstanding. Thank you, Chief, for that preface. Do we have any questions on the consent?
Mr. Chairman, I would move the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
We've got a motion and a second. Can we get the vote, please?
Director Gale.
Yes.
Gould.
Aye.
Orzali.
Aye.
Barnes.
Aye.
Sheets.
Aye.
Clark.
Aye.
Kelly.
Aye.
And Wood.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Moving on, we have a presentation, Chief Harms and Deputy Chief Bridge.
Hear me okay? There we go. A little delay. President Wood, fellow board members, Chief Harms. It's just my honor and privilege to be able to give this presentation out tonight. So I'm just going to take a few minutes to share some words about this outstanding crew members, and also take a moment to share some video footage as well. So here at Metro Fire, we do take great pride in recognizing the accomplishments of our members. When an individual or crew goes above and beyond, it is my great honor to recognize them at our annual awards luncheon. Although in this case, due to the level at which these individuals performed, I've asked them to come to a board meeting where I can publicly acknowledge their accomplishments. The commendation of valor is given for an individual's outstanding performance and bravery in saving a life while on duty. We are proud to announce that Captain Josh Leonard received this award for his extraordinary life save on a call last September. And just to show you the commendation valor, I'm going to be bringing Captain Josh Leonard up with his crew members. I don't want to single him out because I know true crew member that he is back there. I want to leave him with his crew for a moment. We'll have him come up shortly, the rest of them. On September the 9th, but before I do this, before I read the rest, let me just, let's get this thing going with some video. This is some good footage of one of our news channels here. Let's get that. Let's see if I got that.
Oh my God, we were scared to death. I opened my door and it was black in my apartment.
That was a neighbor evacuated as an apartment next door on the second floor of this complex was engulfed in flames.
The small child inside there, I mean, we wanted to go in.
Officer David Moranz of the Citrus Heights Police Department and two of his fellow officers were first on scene. Learning that an 8-year-old boy was trapped inside, they tried to make their way in, but had to make a split-second decision.
We just couldn't get through that door with the heat and the debris.
As Sac Metro Fire arrived and took over, the boy's parents frantically searched for their son. At one point, they ran into him but lost him in the heavy smoke. They eventually had to evacuate and made their way down from the second-story balcony. Two other neighbors also had to be rescued.
Ultimately put ladders to the building.
Fire Captain Joshua Leonard says all he could think about was finding the child. Making his way through the heavy smoke and flames, he found the boy.
When I picked him up, he was completely limp, so I knew he wasn't responsive. I didn't feel him breathing as I was carrying him.
Leonard says the child's location in the house was like a miracle corner, tucked away from the flames.
He was on the floor next to his bed in a room with the door was closed. And so all it was smoke in his room. He wasn't exposed to any of the high heat.
Carrying the boy out, time wasn't on the child's side.
As fast as I could get him to the ambulance and get him out of there, I grabbed him and ran.
We want to make sure we secured that airway quickly and made sure that we got him to the definitive care of the hospital quickly.
And they did, and this boy is alive because of it.
When you're able to affect a life like these men did this morning, that's what they signed up for. And ultimately, they made a huge impact.
Okay. Well, that video was able to depict a lot of it, but there were a lot of other details that go with that call that I want to make sure I just share with everybody. It was on September the 9th, 2016. Engine Medic and Rescue 21 and Engine 23 were dispatched to 7673 Greenback. I worked at that station right there in Citrus Heights for a few years. I know this was really close, so they didn't have a lot of time to make things happen on the engine en route to this call. But upon arrival, it was reported that the 8-year-old boy was trapped in the second-floor apartment unit with active fire in the apartment, heavy smoke showing. The child's parents had also been trapped but were able to self-rescue from a window of the apartment. The child was with his parents when the fire had broken out but became lost in the smoke and ran back into the bedroom. He was later to be discovered lying next to his bed. Engine 21, staffed by Captain Leonard and Jaden Fitz and firefighter Stephen Powers, were the first ones to arrive. Engineer Fitz was operating the pump panel, and he had to overcome some water supply issues that they had, and he was forced to modify his operation real quickly. And then Captain Leonard and firefighter Powers made their way to the front door where the 2 units were involved in heavy fire. They were informed that the child was trapped in the apartment. Firefighter Powers deployed the hose line and began to extinguish the fire, and Captain Leonard had made his way into the apartment. And generally, we have the privilege of new technology, which allows us to expedite our searches in these facilities, but technology isn't 100% all the time. So as the technology of the thermal imaging camera had failed him, as at that point we go back to the old tactics, and that's using just your hands and your senses. And Captain Leonard did obviously a fantastic job of going right back to what he was founded upon, those basic search principles. So he made his way into the apartment and did a search, and then without any regards to his own safety, he's there by himself for the moment until he was able to locate the little boy next to the bed. So he brought him out, and the child was not breathing, didn't have a pulse. Captain Leonard started making his way over to Medic 21, and many times once you come out in that environment, your mask begins to fog up. So he had the help of firefighter Sean Scollard from Engine 23, who came and helped realize the grave nature of the situation. He took the young boy from him and began en route to Medic 21, so where they began medical treatment. So after receiving the child, the Medic 21 crew of firefighter Matt Carlson and firefighter James Doyle initiated advanced life support and began the Code 3 transport to Mercy San Juan Hospital. Engine 21 remained at the scene and continued the extinguishment efforts, and while the rescue of the child was taking place, the crew on Rescue 21, with Captain Colin Swarthout, Engineer Ryan Ross, firefighter John Lowe, and firefighter Tyler Kraft, were notified that a couple who lived in the next-door apartment were trapped on the balcony of the unit. And this was the civilians were threatening to jump from their location at that point. The Rescue 21 crew was able to rescue them using ground ladders to evacuate them to safety. The parents of the rescue child were injured, escaping from the fire, and required treatment, which was rendered by other units on scene. So we're happy to report that the child responded to treatment and was successfully resuscitated in the emergency room. He was later transferred to UC Davis Children's Burn Center, where he eventually made full recovery from the burns he received from the fire. So it was a great honor for the fire chief to present to you the Commendation of Valor for your outstanding performance and bravery in saving life while serving the Sacramento Metropolitan Fire Districts. So congratulations, and thank you for your dedication. Additionally, during this call, firefighters displayed extraordinary professionalism and bravery in rescuing a total of 3 people who were in immediate danger. Each of these members acted in the highest traditions of the fire service. It was my pleasure to recognize each of these firefighters and present them a company commendation certificate. So can I please have the Engine 21 crew, consisting of Captain Josh Leonard, who received the Commendation of Valor Award, Captain Josh Leonard, Engineer Jaden Fitz, and firefighter Stephen Powers, Rescue 21 crew, consisting of Captain Colin Swarthout, Engineer Ryan Ross, firefighter John Lowe, and firefighter Tyler Kraft, and Medic 21 crew, consisting of firefighter Matt Carlson and firefighter Sean Scollard of Engine 23. Can you please join us up here with Chief Harms and I to be recognized for your outstanding acts that performed as a company? So congratulations to all of you. Come on up. done. Thank you, gentlemen. All right, these fine gentlemen are in service, actually back in service right now, so I want to get them on the road. And gentlemen, thanks so much for coming down and sharing this moment with us. We appreciate that.
Thank you so much, Chief. That's outstanding. Love hearing those stories. At this time, we're going to take a brief recess into closed session, and we will be back out shortly. Well, thank you all for your patience. Counsel, would you report out, please?
Yes, Director. The board met in closed session for a conference with legal counsel concerning pending litigation pertaining to the matter of Tracy Valentine versus Sacramento Metropolitan Fire District. No action was taken.
Thank you. Moving on, we have a public hearing. Before we get to the presentation of the public hearing by CFO Thomas and Assistant Chief Hine, Counsel, I believe you have something to add.
Yes, thank you, Director. To all of the directors, there's been a minor change to some of the language in the proposed ordinance. This is the first reading of the ordinance. You won't be voting for passage of the ordinance tonight. That will be occurring at the next regularly scheduled board meeting. However, the changes to Section 5 of the proposed ordinance, the language was changed in order to clarify the reasons behind the fee ordinance and to clarify the intent of the district in seeking to impose an increase in some of the fees that are subject of the ordinance. I'd like to read into the record as required what the new language of the Section 5 is now reads, and it reads as follows. The fees and charges imposed by this ordinance are for the purpose of meeting operating expenses in connection with the services provided for the particular activity referred to in each charge. These include costs for employee wage rates and fringe benefits, supplies, equipment, or materials related to the service being provided, and the cost to maintain the particular service within existing service areas. End of the quote, and that's all I have unless there's any questions.
Do you have any questions for counsel on those changes? Right, thank you. As CFO Thomas and Chief Hine come to the podium, I'll read off the public hearing procedure. We're going to start off with their presentation. Then there will be the opportunity for members of the board to ask questions of staff. Then we will have the opportunity for members of the public to speak in support of the ordinance. We will then have questions from the board, if any, of those speaking in support, then there will be an opportunity for individuals to speak in opposition to the ordinance, and we will then have an opportunity for the members of the board to question those individuals. Not finally, but after the public speaking's over, we will have an opportunity for staff to rebut comments made by the members of the public who spoke, and then there'll be public input on that rebuttal, if any, at that time. And then finally, we'll close with board comments, discussion, but we will not vote tonight. The vote will be on August 24th. So with that, it is yours, Amanda.
Good evening, and I actually think that Chief Harms would like to make a few remarks before I begin. So I'll turn it over to him.
Thank you. Board members, tonight we're bringing to you is the ambulance fee adjustment. As I became the fire chief, there was a number of things in meeting with staff and with CFO Amanda Thomas about the financial side. And one of the things that we identified was that the last time we had looked at the fee for services was 2012. So over the last 5 years, there was a number of changes and a number of expenses that have increased during that time. And so we went through and internally looked at it, and then externally hired an outside consultant firm to look at our fees and to bring those forward to us. So they'll present that to you today. But the other thing that we wanted to do was not to wait 5 years and to be able to look annually at what is our cost for services and does there need to be any adjustments for that. During this past of about 6 or 7 months, I'm very happy with the work that the Randy and the EMS division has done and what Amanda has done on being able to go through and make sure that we cover everything and make sure that we cross the T's and dot our I's on the financial side and the expectation as we move forward. So thank you, and Amanda, it's all yours.
Thank you. And good evening, directors, Chief Harms. So in terms of the presentation that we're going to go over this evening, I'm going to talk a little bit about the background and the context surrounding the proposed adjustments that we have, and then I'll turn it over to Chief Hine, who's going to talk specifically about what we're recommending tonight. So just to talk first a little bit about what our goals are. Essentially, there are 3 goals for this ordinance that will adjust the rates that are charged by the district for medical aid and ambulance transport services that are provided. The first of those is that we want to align our current cost recovery with our actual operational costs to provide the services. Secondly, the ordinance would establish annual fee adjustments that are based on a published index, and that adjustment would be aligned with our fiscal year budgeting process. And then finally, we anticipate that as we're doing here tonight, we would at regular intervals, every 3 to 5 years, review the actual cost to deliver the service and make any necessary adjustments to ensure appropriate cost recovery. So in terms of background, as Chief Harms said, the last adjustment to this rate schedule was in 2012, and that was by ordinance in 2012. Since that time, the district's medical transportation service costs that's reported to the state of California in connection with the GEMT program has increased more than 30% between fiscal year 11-12 and fiscal year 15-16. I do want to point out that these costs that we report for GEMT are somewhat more narrowly defined than we would consider our overall total EMS costs, but looking at the trend in this category really is an indication of the overall trend in our cost to provide EMS services. So just to give you an idea of what that looks like, in fiscal year 11-12, we reported total medical transportation service cost of about $32 million. By the most recent fiscal year that was completed, so fiscal year 15-16, that total cost was about $42 million, and as you can see, that's a 31% increase over that period of time, that same period of time during which we haven't adjusted our rates at all. So the same thing, at that same time that our costs have grown, there's also been a shift in the coverage that's provided to the individuals who are being transported, what I'll refer to as the payer mix. So if you look in fiscal year 11-12, and we're going to look at the percentage of transports by coverage type, you can see that about 39% of the transports in 11-12 were covered by Medicare. About 23% by Medi-Cal, about 20% by insurance, and about 18% are what we're calling bill patient or private pay, essentially no coverage. If you look fast forward to the most recent fiscal year reported 15-16, you can see that our Medicare percentage remained relatively consistent at about 40%. But that Medi-Cal slice of the pie really grew. So that went from 23% in fiscal year 11-12 to 33%, about a third of total transports in fiscal year 15-16. And one of the primary reasons for that is the different eligibility requirements under the Affordable Care Act. So you have people who are Medi-Cal eligible in 15-16 that were not in 11-12, and we're sort of seeing some of the results of that. What that also meant, however, is that because Medi-Cal is taking up a larger share of the pie, our insurance share of the pie went from 20% down to 17%, and then that bill patient went from 18% to 10%. So really you can see that there are people who either previously had insurance who went to Medi-Cal or previously had no coverage that went to Medi-Cal that's accounting for that growth in the Medi-Cal category over that period of time. The reason that that's important for us as we talk about cost recovery is that we see drastically varying rates of recovery based on payer type. So what you're seeing here are the average payments per transport by payer type, and the reason that you see the difference is that there are caps for Medicare and Medi-Cal. So Medicare cap is about $460, and you're seeing that we receive an average payment per transport that's consistent with that cap. Medi-Cal has a lower cap, and as you can see is our lowest average payment per transport. That cap is $168. Then when we get to the private insurance line, that green bar there, you can see there we're generally recovering the charges associated with the transport. And then finally, when we get to that bill patient line, we are generally not recovering charges associated with the transport. So who's paying really has an impact on how much is ultimately paid and how much cost is recovered. We can really see that impact when we look here. This is the same pie chart that I showed you on the other page. So this is the breakout of transports in fiscal year 15-16. If you look at how that translates into payments, you can see that the 40% of transports that are Medicare represented about 33% of the total payments received. That 33% of transports that are Medi-Cal represented only 9% of the total payments received, again, based on that low cap for Medi-Cal. And then you see the bulk of our payments are actually coming from insurance, where we're able to recover the full charge associated with the transport, and then a much smaller amount coming from that bill patient category. So when we look at this, and I think it's also important to note that total pie there of payments in fiscal year 15-16 represented about $31.7 million in total payments. If you remember where I started this, our medical transportation service cost, which again is kind of a narrowly defined cost category, was $42 million. So there we already have a gap of about $10 million in terms of our cost recovery versus our costs. Really, the opportunity that we have to close that gap is going to be, within that insurance category, which is representing, as I said, about 56% of our payments today, and that's where the increased charges would result in increased cost recovery. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Chief Hine to talk to you about what is specifically proposed in terms of those adjustments.
And good evening. Before we discuss this chart, I'd like to just give you a little background history on how some of these rates were derived. The proposed rate structure was compiled with the assistance of AP Triton after analysis was conducted, and they are with us in the audience tonight. The rates were determined by calculating the total cost of services. These costs include both the direct and indirect cost of service delivery. These categories of rates are based upon a nationally recognized criteria set by CMS, or the Center for Medicare Medicaid Services. Also, the California Health and Safety Code, Section 13916, gives the district the authority to enact these fees. Looking at direct costs, these include personnel, ambulances, equipment, supervision, billing, dispatch, and supplies. The most significant cost as recognized by CMS is the cost of readiness, which is a direct cost of the need to staff units when they are not assigned to calls. Now, some indirect costs include shared services such as human resources, finance, IT, and the fire stations themselves. So now we'll go through this chart and review the categories listed here. So if we look at the first responder fee, this fee is applied when a Metro Fire first responder unit responds to a medical aid, assesses the patient, provides patient care report, and the patient is transported. The treat no transport category, the fee is applied when a patient is assessed, treated, and chooses not to be transported to a local hospital. These bundle rates that you see listed in the third and fourth position was done in 2012, is when this bundling model was utilized. This process has made it more efficient for members to enter data into the EPCR system and versus inputting up to 55 items on a very involved incident as they go to document those calls. The bundle rates include such things as IV and airway supplies, medications, and soft goods. Now, some additional fees that are not listed here is for district apparatus emergency response standby cost, patient assistant request for profit care facilities, cost recovery for any agency that requests medical standby, and those additional fees were approved by the board under Resolution 2016-061 under miscellaneous fee schedule. So while these fee adjustments represent a 25.8 increase over the last 5 years, or approximately 5% a year, our actual costs, as CFO Thomas mentioned, have actually increased 31% over that same time frame. On this bar graph from 2014, which was the last time this type of data was compiled, we can see where Metro Fire falls in relation to the 58 counties in the state based upon 2014 rate structure. So no doubt these other counties have increased their rates since 2014 as well. Several of the regional agencies are in process or will soon be in process of adjusting their rate amounts as well. Now, only 2 of these counties that are listed here are subsidized by the respective counties for ambulance transport, and those are Santa Clara and Alameda. So as we look at the rate we find for the proposed rate listed in red there, we can see that we are in keeping with even 2014 numbers, and that all those other agencies, again, probably have realized an increase in their service fee that they're charging for ambulance transport. So Metro Fire will continue to seek cost recovery for services provided in order to maintain our current service levels. It is estimated that these fee adjustments would result in additional cost recovery of $2 to $3 million during the fiscal year 2017-18. So based upon this information presented, staff recommends the adoption of Ordinance 2017-01 that would amend the ambulance fee schedule as proposed. That will end our presentation, and at this point, CFO Thomas and myself would be happy to entertain any questions you might have.
Moving on, do we have questions from the board for either Chief Hine or CFO Thomas?
I have just one.
Director.
If there is an area vac, would the cost be different?
I'm sorry, Director, if you could repeat this.
Area vac, would that be different? A cost would be more?
For
Airlift.
For an air ambulance? Mm-hmm. Within Metro Fire, we utilize Metrocopter 1 for some of our transport, but if there is any, we also have Reach and CalStar in the region that we would use. And if we were to use an outside agency, those costs would be reflective of whatever those agencies charge.
Mm-hmm. And also, in the transportation of a patient, we just don't put the person there. There's service that is offered in the ambulance or aircraft. Isn't that true?
That is correct.
Yeah. Because in some instances, people might say we just picked up a body and moved it over to the hospital, but something takes place as they go to the primary care provider.
Correct.
I think it's, thank you.
Director Gould.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief Hine, I have a couple of questions relative to Section 7. Section 7 says that it shall be adjusted. So that's pretty strong language. Shall be doesn't leave us much latitude here as the CPI drives that annual adjustment that's been required. And then as you correspond Section 7 shall be to Section 9's may, I'm just wondering from a business standpoint, may it not be in the interest of this district that both be done on a shall be? Because I think oftentimes what happens is when we get busy with other things in this district, sometimes our ambulance transport fee schedules and staying on top of that business model take a back seat to other things. And yet if in this policy it allows us to have a shall be, and that's automatic and done through the organization, and then there's a shall be, the board is required to then look and hear from our operational staff that there has been something that needs to be adjusted beyond the CPI. I think with both of those being shall be's, it will keep us away from large increases that are required, in like what we're proposing tonight. So I'd just like to have a conversation about if 7 and 9 could both read similarly, it would put this board in a position where every year we would have to have some type of a presentation and an action item from operations that said we've had a 2% increase or a 6%, whatever, and that we need to make that action happen now so that we can stay on top of the game of accurate reflections of what our costs are, and we can keep those larger increases at bay, so to speak. And it's required of this body to stay attentive to that because we go away for 5 years and we come back. And I think when it says shall be, it puts a little bit more teeth to it for us in the sense of it becomes our responsibility to stay on top of it and work with the staff. Your take?
And certainly, we can make those recommended adjustments to the verbiage, and being able to confer with legal on that and Chief Harms as far as any changes that we might make to the ordinance as presented.
Chief, Ms. Thomas, in your presentation, one of the goals you mentioned, the item number 3, was review at regular intervals, rather than changing language in the ordinance, which could be a material change, which could delay our vote and implementation. Can you maybe explain what you meant by review at regular ordinance intervals and see if that addresses Director Gould's concerns?
Certainly, and I think that reviewing at regular intervals really is, sort of the spirit of that Section 9, which is we're not just going to rely on what the CPI is every year, but we really want to understand what our costs are. It may address your concern, Director Gould, that in Section 7, we will be before the board every year for that Section 7 adjustment. So that really is the opportunity to ensure that the board is acting every year to address the cost recovery and being aligned with costs.
Is there some tickler or some other calendar item that you will have that will have a review at regular intervals? 3 to 5 years, as you said in your presentation.
Correct. So the idea is that every year we will be before the board with the adjustment relative to the CPI. And then in the 3 to 5 year regular interval period, we would take a more holistic look at what is our cost data and how does that translate into what our cost recovery rates should be. So I think we're saying the same thing. I hope that we're saying the same thing.
Well, Mr. Chair, if I could, and this is part of that conversation that we're having today is when you say you'll be before the board on July 1st for CPI adjustments, that's automatic. Mm-hmm. Whatever the CPI is, the CPI is. We're basically not negotiating that. And I think maybe this language could be tightened to say, and at the same time you're doing that, if there are any other fees on an annual basis, we'll have that conversation in the same evening. Because I'm afraid that one is annual, so that's set in stone, July 1, you're going to be here, we're going to go, whatever it is, boom, it's automatic. And that same conversation can be, and in addition to that, tonight we're also proposing X adjustment so that the lag time between cost and recovery of those services is shortened to its maximum amount so that we don't find ourselves running behind and taking a whole nother, to use your words, 3 to 5 years to catch up with costs that have already started to impact the agency, which puts us, in my mind, a little bit stronger financial position as we're moving along. It's like if you're buying gas and you're waiting 3 years to actually adjust the cost, it's like you might be losing money that we don't need to be. So I would just say, I think, yes, we might be saying the same, but I'd like to tighten it. And I'd like to almost put this group on notice that every July 1st, CPI is automatic, and then we're going to have an hour-long conversation that the EMS division comes up with on, and here are some additional costs that don't get covered by that. Boom, we approve it. We're now going to get a whole, season of recovery of costs before maybe it triggers a conversation 18 months or 24 months after the actual costs are occurred. So mine's just a tightening and making this may to shall be.
Understood.
If I may. John, one of the comments was, is that possible? Is that sort of thing possible?
Well, you could change the word may to shall in section 9, but if that's all that's being done, you're binding the board to actually revising the fee schedule, and either up or down or whatever the board would elect to do, which would require a public hearing and notice like we're going through now. And so it would then read the board of directors shall from time to time revise this fee schedule, and I don't know whether that's something the board would want to bind itself to do. One purpose of the CPI was to have for the automatic increases according to the CPI without having to come forward to the board on a public hearing. So I just point that out, that's one of the effects of changing the word may to shall. There's certainly nothing wrong with leaving the language the way it is, and giving the board the latitude and the discretion to make revisions in the fee schedule after a properly noticed public hearing like we're having now, if there's certain charges that are going up faster than expected or were unanticipated at the time of filing this ordinance. That would seem to be a good thing. And there's nothing wrong with having that, while at the same time, though not stated in the ordinance, have a directive from the board that we do want to have as a mandatory directive that we have this issue subject to review so that we can decide whether or not we want to exercise this discretionary provision to revise. Well, that would kind of kill two birds with one stone.
That directive would get me what I would like to see happen so that we don't fall victim to what we've had in the past. So that's fine, too.
And I think one of the things that we were really looking at was that we can look at it as an organization and say, this looks to be keeping up with increases, but the 3 to 5 was a lot of that we've negotiated a new contract with 522 or with the members, and we need to be able to sit down because I believe a portion of it will be predictable when we see there's been a big jump in our labor costs. And to be honest with you, 80-some% of our cost here, a lot of it is labor, and that we can look at that. And that was where we kind of looked at somewhere between 3 and 5, doing a full assessment and coming back to the board with that and feeling that the each year gave us an opportunity that we shall do those. And that was kind of the thoughts that were behind it.
Director Roselli.
Well, this is just a question about if there are other fees that should be reviewed on an annual basis, then perhaps we designate a time in the year, July 1, to review all the fee schedules so that it happens annually and it is comprehensive. Just a thought.
Director Barnes? Did you want to respond to that? Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Thank you. Yeah, my interpretation of this in Section 9 was the may. The shall will come in July 1. May will be, we may not have to revise it, right? Whereas if we shall, then it sounds like there has to be some form of action to make an adjustment either to increase or lower we may look at the operational costs and the need of the CPI and think we really don't need to raise it because we're not in the business to making a huge profit of this. We just need to cover the labor costs attributed to that. Is that correct? Is that where the may comes from in Section 9 on that?
Yes, yes. So I think what I'm hearing is a desire to ensure that we are reviewing it without constraining ourselves to having to take action if we don't feel that action is warranted.
Any other comments or questions for CFO Thomas or for Chief Hine? Director Kelly.
Not related to the matter of shall or may. When you've done your projections for how this will affect the budget for transport, et cetera, what have you used as an average? Because I did a little math and I figured you might be on the hook for $3,000 very easy for an ambulance ride.
Oh, in terms of what the
average ambulance fee that is billed.
Right. So Chief Hine is probably actually better able to speak to what a typical charge might be. But in terms of us estimating what the increase in cost recovery revenue would be, no.
Just concerned about what model you used to try to determine it.
Yeah.
What's the average cost?
Really, I'll tell you the best way to do it is to look and say, what are we recovering from insurance today? And we know it's going to go up, as he said, roughly 25.8% based on what the increase in the rate is. So that's how we've estimated the revenues, not from an actual transport charge.
I am not so concerned about how you estimated the revenues.
Yeah.
But I know that you used what's the average ambulance ride, and that's what I'm after. What's the average ambulance ride?
That's the baseline.
Right.
It costs $3,500, it costs $4,500, or it costs $2,600.
Right. So there's a difference between the charge and the amount that's recovered.
Okay?
Yes.
The charge is what I'm concerned about.
The charge is what you're concerned about. Let me pull that number for you.
I mean, I did the math on the charges that you had there, and if you had the fee, if you had the oxygen, if you had the ALS, if you had $100 worth of mileage, et cetera, it looks like it's about $2,600 to $3,000. I just wondered if my math was correct, or if there's some other stuff going on there that's not apparent. I want to know how badly I need to stay healthy so I don't have to take an ambulance ride.
Well, I think one thing that's important, I think, for everyone to understand is when we talk about coverage, the Medi-Cal beneficiary isn't paying the difference between what Medi-Cal is covering and what's being charged. And similarly, somebody who is covered by insurance is typically paying their deductible or whatever co-pays are associated with that. So the impact to the individual is really when we look at that bill patient category, where a lot of times that is not being recovered. If there are financial hardship issues, there are ways for the district to waive that. So I apologize. I was in the middle of doing my calculations and I lost my train of thought. Okay, so if I look at our 15-16 numbers, it looks like the average that we had for insurance, and that's where we're generally recovering most of the charge, is about $1,700, and we're looking at about a 25% increase. So that's a little under $2,200.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Director Rosali. Do we have any other comments or questions for CFO Thomas or Chief Hine? Director Clark?
Yeah. You know that little graph that you had with all the counties, and why was Tehama County so outrageous? I mean, I mean, it was like way up there. What would account for that?
From the data we have, because of the geography and the remoteness and the rural community that is served there, from the data we have, that would be the primary reason why we see such a
I mean, that's
high
a
rate.
huge compared to all the others. That was just my curiosity of it. Okay.
Director Sheets?
So because of the geographical area, you would probably use more air ambulances for that golden hour?
Yeah.
And
More than likely in that service area.
Makes sense, yeah. It's just so out of whack with everybody else.
All right, any other comments for Chief Hein or CFO Thomas? All right, we'll move on now. Do we have any individuals from the public who want to speak in support of the ordinance? Then we will not be asking those individuals any questions. Do we have any individuals who want to speak in opposition of the ordinance? Oh, John, my apologies. You want to speak in support?
Yes, sir. John Barsler, Director, Local 522, President of the Board, Chief Harms, staff. I'm just going to speak in support of this fee study and urge you guys to support it. This agency, the EMS system is never going to go down. We're always going to increase calls annually. And I know as being a director, there's been times that because our infrastructure is so old and we haven't been able to keep pace with it, that we've had no reserve medics. And we haven't been able to put companies into circulation to do transports based on that. This is crucial for our men and women to do what they need to do to serve the public. So that's why I urge you guys to support this. Thank you. I'll take any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Barsdale? Thank you so much. Now, moving on, do we have any individuals from members of the public who want to speak in opposition to the ordinance? Is there any rebuttal from staff to Mr. Barsdale's comments? I didn't think so, but got to ask it. This is an opportunity for any other public input of any sort on the ordinance. If there is none, we'll move on for any final comments or discussion from members of the board. Yes, Director.
I was just going to say, I really think that this is a great opportunity for us to tighten up the business model that EMS represents for this organization, and I'm glad to see it being done, and I'm looking forward to it being done in a more cyclical nature because this is a large portion of what we do, and we need to keep it really tight. So thank you for all the time that staff have put into getting us to this point and having an initial public hearing, and I look forward to the 2 weeks final hearing and moving this along so that we can get these fees adjusted appropriately. Thank you very much.
All right, that will close the discussion on this. We will not vote tonight on this ordinance, but we will vote at the next meeting on August 24th. Moving on to action items, Chief Johnson.
Good evening, directors. Chief Bridge has limited me to just 30 words, so I'm going to try to meet that for him.
Wow.
Assistant Chief Maurice Johnson, your fire marshal. Before you tonight is a retroactive agreement for McCullen Airport Aircraft Rescue and Firefighting Services, better known as ARF. The County of Sacramento, through the Office of Economic Development and Marketing, has provided ARF services to the United States Coast Guard since the year of 2000. These services have been provided through sub-agreements in the form of an ARF services agreement between the County of Sacramento and Metro Fire. The most recent agreement expired on June 30th, 2017. The agreement before you tonight covers a term of July 1st, 2017 through December 31st, 2022. In 2001, the County of Sacramento entered into a master purchase and sale agreement with the McCullen Business Park, LLC, for properties located at the former McCullen Air Force Base, now known as McCullen Park, which includes McCullen Airport. The assignment agreement will assign to McCullen Business Park all of Sacramento County's rights, responsibilities, and interests as it relates to the retroactive agreement for ARF services. The major change to the agreement, other than the term and the primary contractor, or that the Coast Guard is now responsible for replacing ARF-1, our primary ARF unit that they furnished to us. That cost is roughly $750,000 to $1 million. We won't be on the hook for replacing that apparatus once it becomes unusable. The other big change is it allows Metro Fire to determine the type and kind of personal protective clothing that our firefighters wear during the course of this contract. That's pretty significant for us, as the rest of the airports, or many of the airports throughout the United States, have changed from a proximity type of a firefighting suit, if you will, the silver turnouts, to more of a structural firefighting ensemble, which is what we distribute to all of our firefighters. That's roughly a $90,000 savings, not having to maintain those, purchase those, and quite honestly, our engine crew out there, they have both sets. One's on the structure engine, and then the silver set's on the ARF engine that they respond with. So that'll help with operations, definitely. The agreement with the County of Sacramento provides Metro Fire funding for ARF services in the amount of $15,710,226.50 over this 5-year agreement. I'd like to thank Chief Shannon, Jeff Fry, CFO Thomas, and Council Lawver and his staff, as there's been many, many documents, literally thousands of documents over the last several years, and 44 extensions over the life of this contract. The Board of Supervisors met on the 8th, which was Tuesday of this week. They approved this contract on consent, and now it's before you. Staff recommends the board approve this retroactive agreement with the County of Sacramento for ARF fire protection services and the assignment agreement related to those services. I'll take any questions you might have.
Do you have any questions for Chief Johnson?
Mr. Chair, I have one.
Yes.
Chief Johnson, thanks for that presentation. Just really quickly, this primarily is an agreement between us and the Coast Guard, with the county really acting as potentially a mediator, correct?
So it's actually the other way around. It's an agreement between the County of Sacramento and the United States Coast Guard. The County of Sacramento is a primary contractor. We act on behalf of the county, providing those services as a subcontractor.
But primarily the service is rendered for and on behalf and to the Coast Guard.
Yes, so operationally, yes, it's primarily for the airplanes that fly with the Coast Guard.
Right. And is there anything in this particular contract or in consideration for the escalation of risk that's going to occur at McClellan Park as more and more flights come and go out of that facility? We can only expect that risk would increase. Is that being considered as we look at this is a good contract to cover the obligation to the Coast Guard?
Yes.
Are all these other agencies that are landing and taking off at the McClellan Park just benefiting from that? And yet the Coast Guard's really, and the county are on the hook for that? Is there a consideration down the road as we continue to provide that good relationship with the Coast Guard and the work that we do with them? But as we see more and more aircraft come and go out of that facility, are we looking at how we're going to build that out because of the risk? Is that even on the table?
So yes, 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 and yes.
Excellent.
So when we look at the entire contract as it stands today, it's with the County of Sacramento. Once that's assigned to McClellan Business Park, they're a business or for profit, that is a conversation that's being had with all of the users within the McClellan Airport who use that on a daily basis. With respect to operations out there, today the level of protection that Metro Fire provides out there is on par and in fact greater than what is provided at some of the larger airports. McClellan Airport is a unindexed airport with an uncontrolled airspace, whereas International, for instance, is a index level C, and we have just the same amount of not only agent, but also the number of firefighters. And then on top of that, we also have the support staff that comes from other fire stations in close proximity.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Chief Johnson?
I have a question.
Would you like to go?
This is, I would like to see the contracts from the first one, from the transfer from the feds to the county. This is one of the most convoluted agreements I've ever seen in my life. And especially the McClellan Business Park LLC, which was original a company from Delaware who came over. And I've been trying to dig up the transition, what took place, who signed off on it ever since the transfer. I worked out there, as a matter of fact. And The amazing thing is that McClellan Park did not pay any taxes until 2016, and they're supposed to be the owner of it. Now, some of the other sites there, the commissary, Coast Guard, is federal, plus some VA activities out there. That's the other big question, because I'm not a lawyer, but the United States government, I think, always has a hand in a transfer of a base or whatever. But it's very convoluted. That's what I have to say. Very much so. You bet. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chief. We have the presentation. We've spoken with Chief Johnson. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I make a motion we adopt.
I second.
I've got a motion and a second. Can we get the call of the vote, please?
Director Gale.
No.
Gould.
Aye.
Orzali.
Aye.
Barnes.
Aye.
Sheets. Aye. Clark.
Aye.
Kelly.
Aye.
And Wood.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Wonderful. Thank you. Moving on to reports. President's report. I don't have anything to report right now, so we'll move on to the Chief's report. Chief Harms.
Good evening. I'd just like to start off first with congratulations to firefighter paramedic Russ Gardner. Russ was more than 200 applicants put in as a volunteer to be involved with the project with Underwriters Laboratory. For over the last 6 years, Underwriters Laboratory has done and has been a leader in research on the fire ground and the changing fire ground, how that building and construction affects that. Out of that, only 19 individuals were selected, and Russ will represent the district for the next 3 years. They will cover his costs for his travel, but he'll be able to work with a number or 18 other people from across the United States and be part of the panel that drives UL in research. And so having him there will be outstanding, as he will come back and be able to apply that information here at the district. So congratulations to Russ. Myself and VP Ty Bailey made a video last week that's coming out to the members on labor relations and talked about things that we were working on together, and so we'll be sending that out here real soon. On the 31st and then on August 3rd, we finished up the budget and went through and did our final budget reviews, which will be brought to the board here, I believe, in September for your final look at. We have a promotion effective on August 8th of Tim Swank to the Assistant Fleet Manager from internally. And has had a lot of good things happening out there. He was the acting position and moved up into that position permanently. And SRP paramedic Cornell went from an EMT to a paramedic, so congratulations to both of them. We hired a new communications manager, Steve Jordan, and an office tech, Sean Leal, is a new office tech for us. Had a few meetings with a few folks. And a couple last things is this week or next week, Chief Bridge and Chief Johnson are going to be going to Minneapolis and represent the district into a Firehouse, which is a magazine that has started to put a number of forums together where they bring together chief officers in operations and chief officers in fire prevention, and they're having a high-rise forum, and they've invited them, and they're paying their trip to come back, and they'll sit and talk about issues in the fire service related to high-rise fires and the fire prevention aspects of it. And if you've seen recently, there's been a number of high-rises where they've changed the exterior of the building, and the fire and the foam on that has burned, and so they're bringing together a group. I think that group we'll spend some time together, and if I had to predict, they'll probably get back together a few more times. So both Chief Bridge and Chief Johnson will be representing us. And so that's all I have, unless you have some questions.
Any questions for Chief Harms?
Yeah, you're referring to London and Dubai?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, the London and Dubai, and if you remember before that, the Monte Carlo in Las Vegas had an exterior fire that burned up the exterior of it. And so it is a an issue that is happening, and if you look at the building in London, there was no sprinkler system built into that.
A lot of houses, excuse me, a lot of houses have that system. And I know commercial buildings do as well, but I was never aware that they used it on high-rise buildings.
Yeah, what they've been doing is removing the external panels and replacing them, and then with the
weight.
foam, lighter weight, and then it has an insulation value to it, but they can also take it and mold it into anything they want it to look like. A lot of times, if you look at residential, what they have done with it is they'll use the foam backing, cover it with chicken wire, and then put stucco on it. So if the fire gets up underneath there, it can burn in between the studs in that portion. But we don't see a lot of that as much as you do just when it's on the external.
Right. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions for Chief Harms? Wonderful. Thank you, Chief. Chief Bridge?
Okay, thank you, President Wood. Board members, short report tonight, just more of an update with our resources. Good news is they're almost all home right now. We only have about 5 of our members out. They're serving in mostly incident management roles. It's about 5 fires burning to the north of us, very north part of the state, right on the Oregon border, and some of those, our management team members are actually in Oregon. Otherwise, other than that, all of our engines are back home, and so there seems to be a pattern. We're in this lull right now, so that kind of concerns me because just when I go sit down, the phone will start to ring. Call volume, though, otherwise, we had about 16 building fires since the last board report we had. And we're maintaining an average of just under 4,000 calls for every 2 weeks. So outside of that, I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Any questions for Chief Bridge? Okay. Thank you so much, Chief. Moving on to Local 522 report. Good day.
Once again, Director John Barsdale, Local 522. I only have a couple things tonight. I would like to offer congratulations to Captain Leonard and his crew for the save that they had, and as well as all the other operational folks who participated in that incident. We don't always want recognition for the things we do, but it's nice that the district recognizes us and we appreciate it, so thank you. The other thing I'd like to report out is I talked to Ty today. He's at a conference, and he indicated that we agreed on the language on the MOU, and we hope that the district will agree on as well, and we can move forward past and get it posted for our membership. That's all I have for tonight, if there's any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Barsdale? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Moving on to committee and delegate reports. Executive committee has not met since we've last met, and there is no meeting currently on calendar. The Communication Center JPA, Chief Johnson.
Comm Center has not met since your last meeting. Our next meeting is going to be August 29th, 9 a.m. here in this course.
Thank you. The California Fire and Rescue Training JPA, Director Kelly.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the CFRT has not met since I last reported out. We will be meeting on September 21st at the California Exercise Simulation Center.
Thank you. Back to you with the Finance and Audit Committee.
Mr. Chairman, I reported out at our last meeting on the last Finance and Audit Committee meeting. Our next meeting will be August 24th in 2 weeks at 5 p.m.
Thank you so much. Director Gould with the Policy Committee.
Surprisingly enough, this evening the Policy Committee met, and I'm afraid to tell you that I was reelected as the chair, and begrudgingly Director Clark agreed to serve with me, which she's done so faithfully. And we had some really good items there. We took some action on the Workplace Violence Policy Committee, our policy, and it will be moved to the full committee for some conversation. And then we received a presentation on the sick leave policy, which is an administrative action, which will not come to this full board. It was just for information only. And we, with bated breath, wait for the next time that said policy committee can get together, but right now it's TBD. Which is not a disease. That means to be determined.
Thank you very much, Director Gould. Moving on, board member questions and comments. We'll start to the left with Director Kelly.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to say that I think that it was an excellent move we made tonight, approving the increase in cost recovery fees. Certainly something that this district has to look at closely more often than every 5 years. And I think that the firefighting contract at McClellan Air Force Base, I believe that it's a very good thing for this district to be involved in, because now that it's in private hands, we never know when they may go to private fire protection. So I'm glad that we were able to wrap that contract up for another few years.
Excellent. Thank you, Director. Director Clark?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to congratulate Captain Leonard and his crew, and also thank everyone for their presentation. We had some good, really great presentations tonight. So I want to thank, let you know my appreciation for that. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Director. Director Sheets?
I just wanted to echo his comments regarding the staff and their rescue. I'm so proud to be part of this organization. Also want to congratulate Russ Gardner on his promotion, and also the personnel that have been promoted recently.
Thank you, Director. Director Gale?
Well, compliments to the staff, and tomorrow at this time I'll be in Crimson Tide country.
Safe travels. Director Gold?
I just want to again echo the comments of my colleagues in, the accommodations that we saw tonight. I know the men and women just absolutely don't like it. We love it, and we'd like to see more of it. I think it's important that the folks out there see exactly and hear the stories that the men and women do on a day-to-day basis. And so I know it's uncomfortable for them. I saw them fidgeting in the back of the room and wanted nothing more than to leave. But it's actually a great time for us board members to see them come up and be recognized when they do things like this, because despite all of their gear and all of those things, they're still incredibly dangerous experiences that could end the life of any one of them at any time. And I think people really need to understand that. So it's okay for me to see them be uncomfortable. That's a good thing. But thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Director. Director Orzali?
I just wanted to congratulate Captain Leonard and his crew, and also I wanted to commend Amanda Thomas for the report she put together. This organization does such brilliant work in gathering data. It is always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Director Barnes?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know everybody's looking forward to going home, but I'd be remiss if I didn't echo what was being said. But I think in tonight's meeting, we paralleled the importance of this first-class organization, right? We talked about the operations where we saved lives when people are running away. With that operational cost comes equipment cost. Life transport, there was medical aid during that transport, which saved the 8-year-old's life, which is also important. Recognizing our employees, first-class organization, but in that incurs cost. So again, first-class organization on the financial side, the administrative side, defining the need to keep those operations going. So again, another, I would say, a tribute to all of you, the hard work, but I've said it before, first-class organization, well done, and thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you, Director. I would just echo what's already been said. Congratulations to Captain Leonard and his crew and Chief. These kind of stories are wonderful to get in front of us. We love seeing them, and I've always said in the past, the accommodation of members of the public too are also great. When we get those opportunities, it's wonderful to have that. We have, our next meeting will be August 24, 2017, where we're going to do the second reading of the fee ordinance, and we will vote at that time on that. We will also expect a presentation on one of my favorite things, fire camp. So looking forward to that. With that, we're adjourned. Thank you. I made the mistake.
Good thing I have my phone.